Say the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. We do not have any visitors wishing to speak. We do have some special committee reports. Ms. Kolhoff, if you want to start with yours.
Sure. We are moving along with all the plans for the Show Us Your Stripes event. It's on October 22nd. I encourage all board members to buy their tickets and attend. Tickets can be purchased from Deb, or any of the PTAs or athletic teams and everybody else selling them. A lot of good stuff. It's going to be another great event. Definitely need to get some good attendance there though.
The Damon this year?
Yeah, same as last year at the WIC Center. We'll have Chinese auction and great food and drinks and
The wine
fun.
ball.
And a wine pull. And 50-50 raffle.
Great.
Big fun.
I think we had a technology committee meeting. Dr. Schoenfeld, I think you were in there.
We have a technology committee here in Amherst that has about 18 members, so it's a good representative group. Mrs. Ernst, when you're part of it, you take copious notes, and I tried to do my best to share a lot of information succinctly, so thank you. In our first meeting, it was broken into basically 3 sections. The first section was something that I've been doing with different groups, but it was basically an activity to look at a couple things. One of them being, what are the things that hinder the work of the committee, or what are things that get in the way of us doing our best work? So we did a little activity to recognize those things. The next area, which a lot of these correlated with, were what were the things that we can do and focus on that would help us to do our best work as part of this technology committee for the whole district. And we did come up with a couple items as part of the work together. When we gained feedback from everybody, there were 2 things that stuck out, probably the most prevalent. One of them was, we have a lot of technology here and we appreciate the technology department and their support. Professional development and making sure that when we get these progressive or new devices, Google Classroom, that we're able to support people. So that's something we're looking at doing staff development with technology. The other area that came through and sort of emerged was the idea of knowing the roles of people, either through the technology department, the roles of the people that are on the technology department, and communicating effectively with the whole. So when we have these types of meetings, being able to not just have our representatives talk to their building level teams and principals, but have a correspondence that will go out to the whole district and explain basically in a brief, 1-page update of what's happening with technology. Maybe even sharing some of those strategies that might help others or things they could work on. There was also some discussion about requests, for consistency purposes, and my role as the assistant super with technology attached to that, making sure that across the board we're doing what's best for kids, but being, cognizant of the needs of all of our buildings and all of our students. So trying to have consistency in that and being fiscal responsible, as we go through that process. So those were a couple things. There were 2 sort of updates. I'll just go briefly through a couple of these. Looking at the hardware and software that's used within our district, we come to a point with even our Google Chromebooks, the word obsolescence, that after about 5 years or so, we need to replace those. So we want to be sure that we're doing that. Software also, that certain programs are used, and it might happen in one place or another. We want to make sure that what we're using is applied consistently, and again, that will benefit students and that we're using the best things out there. There was some discussion of computer-based testing that you would have been aware of. We did field testing with our students last year. That's the direction the state's going in. We're not ready to jump full bore into that and go with testing this upcoming year, but we're looking at potentially doing some field testing again. It went very well the first time, but there's still a lot of unknowns with that we're not looking to be a leader in that exactly first, and we do have options for the next couple of years. There has been some updates with technology, such as our phone system, the high school labs that are used almost every period were updated, and we're looking at a server upgrade as well. A couple committee updates, and you'll hear about a couple of these things today. It is talking about one-to-one correspondence. How can we get our students the opportunity to use a Chromebook or some type of device if they need that throughout the school day? And we're getting closer to that at a district level. Digital citizenship came up last year in our last meeting, that we have all these devices, but knowing the social media impact and the digital footprint, we're lucky to have Drew Schmidl here today. He's going to share a little bit in our overview of curriculum, but we set up a framework for K through 12, and that was presented at this meeting as well. There are some technologies that we're looking at that's a little progressive. You can see the projector up there. We're looking at beta testing a wireless projector that you would be able to, from your Chromebook, just, be able to project something and present something. We also have document cameras that you would be able to literally go over to a student's workstation, just put this there, and it would also shoot automatically. You wouldn't have to code anything in. So we're trying that with the math department at the secondary level. There's also something exciting that not many people know about, but we, at our June meeting, we looked at, I'll call them virtual reality goggles. So you would have seen the commercials where one of the companies has people with this big goggle on, and they're excited about it. We have 2 kits that we're using, and we'll start at the kindergarten level, but it's really like virtual reality field trips. So we would be able to, if a group of students at first grade might be working on farms, you would literally be able to program and go to some secure site that would have an opportunity to literally wear these goggles and go around and look at different things. It is something that's good throughout even the middle school. We could even see the high schoolers programming some of that and making some of these opportunities good for kids. So we look at having those intact by December. There are 2 other things that are important. STEM has been talked about. We have the capital project that you would be aware of, that we're looking at some STEM opportunities. We've also had people at the elementary level, middle school, and high school start to look at maker spaces, which you'll learn a little bit more about, but the idea that you can work with different widgets and different things, such as this is it's called Raspberry Pi, and I make fun of Mr. Schmidl because he loves saying that. But the idea that kids during study hall might go to the library and code this, that it would tell you the temperature, it would tell you different things about the barometer, what's the pressure. So this is something that they can go and work on. We also had our professionals, as part of the day that we worked on, these little Ozobots are basically coding items that you can set a code, and you do that by drawing pictures with different color coding on sheets like this. And by doing that, you turn this on, you're able to program it, and it will follow the lead and go around almost like a ride or a roller coaster. But it starts the process of coding, which is important nowadays when we talk to some of the businesses out there, that we want to create opportunities that would help our kids to have experience, be able to either go into a career field or college readiness to have some precursor STEM. So this is at the ground floor and having opportunities for kids to come in and explore. So that's another thing that we're looking at. The Smart Schools Initiative you would have heard of, but that is money set aside. I like to call it money that helps you to get closer to one-to-one correspondence, or help when you do have obsolescence, meaning you have to replace things. So we'll be forming our tech committee plus additional members shortly, so we can start looking at that, what we can do to have a plan. It's money that does not have to be spent within 1 year. We have time to lay that out over the course of a couple years, if that's to be helpful. So that Smart Schools Initiative, we do have a fair amount of money, but we're not ready yet. We are getting a committee together to look closer at that. Then the last part, so those were the updates. The last part was really that hands-on part I was talking about here, where some of our practitioners stepped up and shared different opportunities. Mr. Schmidl was one of those that we did some of the Ozobot stuff. we had Mrs. Barnes and Mrs. Witten that went to a conference. So that this Google Summit conference had multiple hands-on, I'll say pragmatic, meaning that our teachers could actually look at this PowerPoint presentation, get some ideas, check it out, and start to do that with their students. So that there's a PowerPoint that we'll be sharing also as part of our newsletter, but it has rich digital opportunities, activities which they call like deep dive activities that takes the learning to another level. The maker spaces I alluded to. The high school too, Mr. Pigeon I saw earlier today, he did a presentation that was shared with the board before, but the idea of some of the digital work happening at the high school, having Castle Learning and IXL as opportunities to help strengthen the students' understanding in certain areas, as well as some of the work they're doing with Aspen as that information system and parent portals used. We want to make sure that we also have our parents able to get on that, and we're discussing ways to have maybe an informational night or something that can present an opportunity for those people that don't use it or take advantage of our Aspen program to understand it better and take advantage. One of the best parts of the day was at the very end of the day, Mrs. Klein had two students of ours share a 3D pen. You've heard of 3D printers, but a student was able to make glasses with this pen. You know, literally make frames and be able to follow a pattern. There's also another iPad add-on function that can make your iPad more engaging, and you can do art with it, but also learning activities. There's also some coding part of that, which we talked about with the STEM. We don't currently have a lot of iPads, but that was a technology and an option that it was great to see children that did a fantastic job presenting that, and that will be shared also in the notes with the students' names as well. And we have a meeting at the end of November. There's some small committee work that would happen, getting the Smart Schools Initiative and some other things in place. But that's as succinct of a summary that I could do for the full day of work we did. Any questions?
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
You mentioned that there's gonna be a kind of a directory of the technology people. Is that gonna include like Mrs. Witten and Mrs. Barnes who have Google expertise, and will it include the library media specialists?
Well, the communication that goes out to explain who these people are, yes, the roles, responsibilities, and those people that are working within the buildings, we see them as a liaison to the work that's happening. We also see them as the eyes and ears of what's happening in the schools, which is an important part of this collaboration and the work. So, yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
And lastly, there's an audit committee. We had an audit committee meeting last week, Thursday. And just to be brief, because our auditors are here to present the findings and stuff, but Mr. Vivolo and I met with the auditors to hear their, this is our second meeting with them in a couple of weeks, to hear what their final draft results were of the audit, to hear any comments, concerns they have regarding it. So they'll be presenting that tonight. We're going to, on our agenda tonight, we're going to accept the draft audit, so everyone's aware. And it has to be submitted to the state by October 15th. Okay. Great.
All right, that's a good segue to the superintendent's report. So, pleased to introduce Carl Widmer from Drescher and Malecki, our external auditors, for the annual audit report. As you may recall, last year you had a similar procedure where, because of the nature of the timeline of how things occur in the fall and the deadlines for the audits, it's not uncommon for the audit to be presented and accepted by the board as presented, and then the draft submitted later to meet the deadline on October 15th for the state. So that's what we're looking to do tonight. Carl?
All right. Thanks for the introduction. Everybody, I'm Carl Widmer. I was the manager from Drescher and Malecki on the audit this year for the district. I'll start off with an apology from Luke Malecki. He's the partner on the engagement, and we were scheduled to present at the previous meeting. However, a couple things got backed up, and he had a prior commitment. He's out at Olean schools on the road. Truth be told, I think you guys got the better end of the deal, but you can be the judge of that. Other than Luke and myself, we had Megan Lowe as the senior auditor on the engagement, and then also a couple staff that returned from previous year's audits. I'm here tonight to present the results of our audit for the year ended June 30th, 2016. As the superintendent mentioned, these findings will just give the qualifying statement that they are draft as they stand currently. We don't anticipate any changes to the numbers or anything like that. The documents are in an internal review process at our firm currently, and we plan on distributing a full draft to this board by the end of the week, and would be able to take any comments or questions by mid next week, and still allow for a timely submission by the October 15th deadline. So,
Oh, because it's a PDF, you might have to scroll.
alright. So following along, I did hand out hard copies of this presentation if you wanted to take notes along the way. Also attached to your presentation are a couple excerpts from the draft statements as they stand. If you wanted to, follow along with those. If you have any questions, please bring them up as they come along. So products of our audit. At the end of our audit, you can expect 4 main items from us. The first being the basic financial statements, and that's the 60 to 70 page booklet that most people refer to as the auditor's statements. So in fact, they are the district statements. We own only a couple pages within that document. The rest of it is prepared by management. We're hired to come in as an independent third party and provide an opinion on whether the financial statements that are prepared by management fairly state the position of the district at June 30th, 2016, and then also for the activity for the 12 months leading up to that date. So that's what we're hired to do, and we own those pages. Our opinion I think they make up about 6 pages out of the whole report. Next is a management letter. This letter contains any recommendations or findings that we might have throughout the audit. Auditor communications letter essentially lays out what the district's responsibility was during the audit, being management. You're responsible for the figures that go into the financial statements. We need your cooperation in looking at records and everything else. And then it also lays out our responsibility as auditors. You guys hired us to do a job. And this letter concludes the audit and makes sure that everybody held up their end of the bargain. Lastly is the extra classroom activity report. And that's kind of a mini financial statement for those student organizations and clubs. So to get into the financial picture, we'll take a look at the general fund. That's the primary focus at the district. This graph presents the past 5 years' activity for the general fund. Difficult to see with the lighting here, but there's a red and a blue line, the red being your spending, and the blue being your revenues coming in. So I mentioned it at last year's meeting, and I'll continue to mention it in future presentations. The goal of a government, a municipality, a taxing entity, is to try to have your revenues match your expenditures. And what that does is it avoids criticism of overtaxing your residents, and it also avoids creating a deficit position in the district. So looking at that, we can focus on 2015-16, that's this year, the year we audited, compared to last year. Both expenditures and revenues increased a little significantly compared to the prior year. On the expenditure side, we went up a little over $3.5 million from $50 million to nearly $54 million. There were a couple of contract settlements, a bus transportation contract, and also the principal payments made on your bond anticipation notes also saw a significant increase from last year. On the revenue side of things, they increased from about $50 million to $52.5 million, and that's due mainly for increased tax revenue and also increased state aid during the year. So when you consider that activity, 2015-16, it shook out that the general fund actually used about $1.5 million of fund balance. So that's compared to last year where we only used a little over $100,000. It was real tight last year. This year, we actually used almost the same amount that was included in your 15-16 budget. If you look at the budget, you have that amount appropriated fund balance. For 15-16, it was about 1.6 million, and in fact, you used almost that whole amount with 1.5. This next slide takes a look at the change in the total fund balance. That's what these bar graphs represent. The red being a restricted fund balance, those are your reserves, and the blue is unrestricted, which includes unassigned and assigned fund balance. So if you look from last year to this year, you see it went down. That's that use of $1.5 million. While it went down, the red portion, if you compare it, remained relatively stable. You're able to maintain your reserves, and the decrease in the blue is that use of that $1.6 million that you appropriated in the budget. And what you'll see is your 16-17 budget that was adopted actually appropriated $0 of fund balance to fund 16-17 spending. So that's what's responsible for the decrease in that blue or the unrestricted portion. This next graph we like to present, and it shows the fund balance that's subject to section 1318 of real property tax law. That's that 4% rule. So when we look at the unassigned fund balance of the district at June 30th, 16, it's $2,189,000. That represents about 3.9% of your 16-17 budgeted appropriations. So that's a compliance item that the district needs to stay within, and in fact, they were in compliance this year. Lastly, the observations. So based on the results of our audit, we plan on including 2 reportable findings in the report. Both findings were communicated with the audit committee, the superintendent, and Melanie and her staff over the past couple weeks. And the first item is a repeat comment for the past few years. And it's a difficult comment, it's a compliance issue, so we're required to include it. And that's surrounding the extra classroom activity funds. There's certain items that the New York State Education Department stipulates are unallowable. An example of this is not offering programs to any grades below 6th grade. So the district here includes some programs for the younger grades and doesn't wish to eliminate them, so they continue. There hasn't been any lashback from the state on this. We've reported it every year, but it's our responsibility to inform you guys. The second item is surrounding oversight and audit preparedness this year. So this comment arose from certain duties and responsibilities not being completed during the 15-16 year. And those duties primarily were review of journal entries and also budget monitoring. So in discussions with the staff here, we noticed that 15-16 was a transitional year when you look at the staffing. Some change to superintendents, some change over in the finance office, and what that led to is some duties went incomplete. So it was our responsibility to communicate those to you. As a result, there were some journal entries that were made late in comparison to other years. That's part of the reason why we don't have a full draft financial statement for you tonight. There was some additional testing that we had to come in and do because it was a little bit late in comparison to prior years. But essentially, and these adjustments are normal adjustments. They're looking at accruals at the end of the year, budget transfers or budget amendments to recognize some donations. And then the nature of those entries is totally allowable. It was just the timing of it. So our comment is going to focus on improving the budget monitoring procedures and then also introduce a formalized journal entry policy. So we get a required review and approval of journal entries that are going in. And the last part of our recommendation that's a little bit new, but we thought it would be useful to you guys, would be to have management prepare some financial statements and compile financial statements that ultimately end up in the report that we issue. But the information is available to compile those in those few months from your June 30th end of fiscal year until we come in and do the audit. And what it would do is allow you guys to have the most current information. You could see what things are gonna look like before we come in and tell you what they're gonna look like, you know? So it gives you a good heads up and some preparedness to adjust the budget or make any accruals that you would need to do. In conclusion, financially, you know, this year, it turns out the 15-16 budget held true. You had planned to use $1.6 million, you used 1.5. So the days of unexpended surpluses seem to be behind the district. We had a few in past years, but not this year. We are prepared to issue an unmodified opinion, and that's a clean opinion. That's the best you can get, pending approval and acceptance by the board. And as I mentioned before, the timing, we're hoping to circulate a draft by the end of this week. You guys can take it home, some weekend reading, and get back to us. There's some contact information up there for Luke and myself. Let us know if you have any questions or concerns, and pending any major changes, we'll go forward and release financial statements by the end of next week to get in for the October 15th deadline. So, thank you for the opportunity to work for the district. It was a pleasure again. Melanie and her staff, we get full cooperation. It's a good audit, so thank you. Any questions tonight?
Thank you for the extra time dedicated to this and all the hard work of you and your staff. It's very much appreciated.
Well,
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, we have the elementary curriculum update from Dr. Schoenfeld, and he has a few co-presenters with him. So, Dr. Schoenfeld, please take it away.
Before I even begin tonight, I want to tell you I've only been in the district since May, but I've had the distinct opportunity and pleasure to work with the staff here. In any of my workings with the professional development or being in classrooms, working with some of our consultants, what I constantly see and what I constantly hear, either myself or through consultants talking to other consultants, they say the teachers and staff of Amherst are so professional. They're engaged in the work that we're doing. They care about our kids and they want to do what's best. So just on behalf of someone that's an outsider that came to your district, I'm proud that it's our district and I'm proud of the staff that we have here. So I just want to start off by saying that. We're lucky enough in October to have 2 presentations. I'll call this part 1 of 2. The elementary will be the first PowerPoint presentation in slides. So we're using the Google platform. October 18th, we'll have a similar format, but our secondary teachers and staff will be part of that presentation. So to start for tonight, I'm lucky enough to have English, mathematics. I talked about Mr. Schmidl with digital citizenship, and I'll talk a little bit about instructional leadership. But we'll start with English with Mrs. Pasquale, and Ms. Chittenden will follow up with mathematics and some of the work that has happened this summer. So feel free to come up, and if you're ready to start, we'll move on to that next section.
Good evening. I'm Marcy Pasquale. This is Lori Chittenden. We're very excited to be here to present to you some of the great things that are happening at the elementary level relative to ELA and math. So I'll provide you with the ELA curriculum update. This past summer, and really a continuation into last year, we focused on continuing our work with our staircase curriculum. So if you can recall to last year when I presented to you, we launched the idea of creating a staircase curriculum with the notion of identifying end-of-year benchmarks that we want our middle-of-the-road kiddo to be at, knowing that we can extend the learning by looking ahead, remediate by looking behind, to prevent any major gaps or overlaps in our curriculum. Last summer, we started with a constrained topic, word work. So the committee worked on creating those end-of-year benchmarks, and then we rolled it out to our staff throughout the year, and we elicited some feedback. So that brings us to our focus for this past summer. So after we lived with the document all year, our ELA team leaders were in charge of eliciting feedback from their grade levels. We made several set of revisions and changes to the word work staircase. We came together for a week this summer, and our first day was dedicated to word study. So we made one last set of revisions where our team leaders were able to talk across buildings, talk across grade levels, to come to consensus on what our quote-unquote final document would look like, knowing that it's still fluid, we're still going to be making adjustments, but it was, after living with it all year, we made a set of revisions that we were comfortable with, and from those revisions, we created curricular guides. So teachers were given a document that identified instructional strategies, materials. We embedded some common formative assessments in the curricular guides that supported the staircase that we were working off of, and also complemented it. So it really allowed for grade levels to have a common language, to have a common understanding of where we want our students to be, at what point of the school year we want them to be at, proficiency and demonstrating proficiency, knowing that we want these end-of-year grade benchmarks to be achieved by the end of the year. So that was our first day this past summer. The rest of the week we dedicated to comprehension. So it's a little bit less constrained, it's a little bit more vague, so it was something that we embarked on with the support of Dr. Shanahan. Grade levels first brainstormed a list of strategies that they taught in their classroom at their grade level, and then we posted them around the boardroom, and we took a look to see which were the high utility strategies that are taught at each grade level. And that's how we prioritized and identified which strategies we would staircase in our 4 days this summer. So it was a really collaborative process. There were a lot of really deep conversations, a lot of great collegial conversations where we were able to come to a common understanding pre-K to 5 on what we expect our students to be able to do and achieve at each grade level for the comprehension strategies that were identified. So you can click to the next. Here's just an example of one of our curricular guides for word work. Again, this complements the word study staircase that we developed and worked with this entire last school year. So as you can see, we have goals for student learning, which are written as I can statements, instructional strategies, explicit language, materials, and assessment. And it's not meant to be instructed in a linear fashion. It's a tool, it's a working document that teachers are able to use in their common planning time, and just, like I said, provide that common language and understanding when it comes to the skill of word work, and this happens to be a grade 1 example. So every grade level created a curricular guide to complement their staircase and shared it with their grade level teams. Okay. And then in terms of the comprehension staircase, we were able to get through 5 comprehension strategies, staircasing them pre-K through 5. We do have other strategies identified that we will be working on throughout the course of this school year. This is an example of the retelling / summarizing comprehension strategy. So at the top we have, the declarative knowledge, what is it, the procedural knowledge of how you use it, and the conditional knowledge of when and why. So this is the explicit language that you will see embedded throughout. We started with pre-K. Pre-K identified their end-of-year benchmarks and expectation for the use of retelling. And it really increases in complexity as you spiral up through the grade level. So you can see that by grade 2, it goes from retelling to summarizing, and it spirals all the way up through grade 5. So this was done through 5 comprehension strategies with the idea of continuing that throughout the course of the year to finish up the strategies that we were not able to get to over the summer. Opening day, we rolled this out to our grade level teams, so the ELA members facilitated that process. We were able to share the curricular guides and elicit some feedback, and also the comprehension strategies. So it's the similar notion of living with these documents, providing opportunities for teachers to teach with them, collaborate, elicit feedback, and then next summer we'll get into creating those curricular guides and then launch into another ELA component, perhaps writing, that's yet to be determined. So it's a multi-year process, it's a collaborative process, and You know, so far the feedback has been very positive. Grade levels are using these documents in their planning, and it's really informing their instruction and guiding where the trajectory of learning of where we want our students to be by the end of the year. That's ELA.
This summer, our math curriculum.
Should we save our questions?
Yes, that was the plan.
Okay,
To save them if that's all right.
questions.
Alright, this summer, the math curriculum committee didn't necessarily meet, like we had in the past. But we offered professional development in math, and we hosted a summer math institute from August 1st to August 5th for any teachers who were interested, K to 5. And teachers had choice. They signed up for things that they felt they were interested in or needed, some boosting in. And we brought in a presenter, Eileen Ryan from Williamsville, who has classroom experience and has experience working in Albany and has traveled across the United States during conferences. She's become more of a presenter here in Buffalo, and we hope to continue our work with her. But teachers were super excited about having her. She was very engaging, and you'll see some of the feedback at the end. But the sessions that she offered, her and I collaborated on creating sessions that were geared towards what we felt teachers needed. She's worked with teachers in Williamsville, so she kind of knew from her experience, and I've had some experience listening to the teachers in our buildings and hearing what they needed. So she created some sessions focused on the Common Core standards, and also a collection of just best math practices. So it wasn't geared toward any one math program. It was more about the practices that all teachers can use, and all children can benefit from. So some of the professional development sessions that she offered this summer, K to 2, they were able to sign up for concrete pictorial abstract, understanding addition and subtraction more deeply, boosting fact fluency with addition and subtraction, and then solving word problems, which we know is really important for the students starting out in kindergarten and moving all the way through to 5th grade. The same kind of offerings were offered to teachers grades 3 through 5, so she could target the grade level a little bit more specifically. The concrete pictorial abstract, but using with multiplication and division, fact fluency with multiplication and division, getting to the core fractions, which we know is huge, grades 3 through 5, and then solving word problems. K to 5, she offered math language in the classroom, and then customization of lessons. So she's worked with teachers in her district to really look at the lessons in the Eureka Math program and customizing them to meet the needs of the students, to fit into timeframes that we have, set up within our classroom day, and really maximizing the time with the students. The teachers felt really comfortable about that, and I think we're ready to hear all of what she had to say. On Friday, the looping teachers, because we have some looping teachers at Smallwood and at Windermere continuing to loop from 1st to 2nd grade and 3rd to 4th, so they were put in a situation where they're teaching an all-new curriculum once again, which they enjoy and welcome, but it makes their task a little bit more difficult. So myself and Danielle Gerbetz from Windermere created a module overview for those teachers and had a whole Friday day with them where we modeled strategies and talked them through lessons and particular issues that we had come across, or positive points of the program. So they really had a good feel leaving on Friday of what they were headed for come September. And then some of the outcomes were that I've noticed is the focus on the math language. So really emphasizing the vocabulary and using the proper language. Ryan and I were talking about an example of, when you're subtracting, if it's, 21 minus 16, you're not saying 1 minus 6, you're talking about there's 1 and you're subtracting 6 ones. Where can we get more 1s from? We can unbundle a 10 and we can create more 1s, and then we have more 1s to subtract. So you're using the language and attaching it to the procedure so kids are developing an understanding. I've seen lots of implementation of the fluency activities that Eileen brought to our district, customization of lessons, people feeling a lot more comfortable in their own skin and doing what they know is right, the implementation of strategies for problem solving,
understanding that conceptual, pictorial to abstract sequence of development that kids go through when they're learning about concepts. And then teachers are requesting more of this kind of professional development where there's choice and, you know, we bring someone in who's engaging and really they can relate to. You know, she's been in the classroom and she talks their language. I put it up here, I'm not gonna read them to you, but some of the teacher feedback. Ryan created a survey that he sent out to teachers, and he got some feedback from them on what they thought, how they felt about the time that they spent, you know, in the sessions, and we were able to share it with the committee, and also we shared it with Eileen Ryan, the presenter also. So some of the things, they liked her new ways of thinking about math instruction. It was meaningful, engaging, and knowledgeable. They loved the approach of underwhelming kids and not overwhelming them. Gave lots of real quick, easy things to do in the classroom. People said it was time well spent. They were really, the energy level and the excitement was there. And they were really thankful that the district supported this and provided them with this opportunity this summer, so.
The survey also assisted us to help plan for future events. So we asked the professionals that were part of the training, what else can we do for you, or what are some things or resources that we can provide for you? So that will help us to shape plans for professional development moving forward. Any questions with the academic piece?
This is Pascal in the English Language Arts. Curious, the comprehensive reading comprehension, the strategies that you developed this summer, is that philosophically a big difference from what teachers were using previously, or just an enhancement, or how would you, in layman's terms, describe it?
Yeah, and we talked about comprehension strategies in terms of informational text as well as literary text, and that there are strategies that we've been teaching for several years. We did a book study years ago with Debbie Miller. Dr. Seidel provided us with support in staff development around comprehension strategies. So there are strategies that we've been, you know, teaching for, you know, a long, long time now. It's just embedding that explicit language and that common understanding of what a strategy is, when do we use it, how do we use it, why do we use it. So it's, you know, the same strategy is just really being explicit with our language and creating a common understanding amongst us as teachers, so that when the students do go up through the grade levels, they have that common understanding and it's being delivered in a similar fashion.
And this helps the teachers and their lesson planning, gives them additional tools.
Absolutely, yeah, provides some clarity, provides some parameters under which we would use the strategies, and we would teach the students to employ the strategies. So we want them to be thinkers, we want them to be, you know, problem solvers and critical thinkers in their reading, and not waiting to be told what strategy to be used when. At the lower levels, pre-K through 2, we're working on that declarative knowledge, you know, what does it mean to summarize, what does it mean to retell? But by the time they're transitioning 3, 4, 5, we want them to be more flexible and more critical in their use of the strategies. So it's really building that foundation so that they can become, you know, fluent users of these strategies in whatever they read, you know, whether it's at the primary, intermediate level, all the way up through high school. So it's really building that foundation.
I know you're only a month in, but do you see any reaction or telltale signs that it's working, or that you know, older
Yeah.
teachers, younger teachers, or any response?
Sure, I think for
From
the
them,
newer
I'm sure they must be
teachers,
telling you a little bit.
yeah, they're thankful for the work that we put in terms of identifying the common language around the strategies, because sometimes we interpret things differently. So that was very much appreciated and helpful. And when we do come together as grade levels for team planning, it does provide that basis of understanding. So, and the initial feedback has been good. They received it well, and we're just, like I said, living with the document this year and eliciting any feedback or changes, even to the format, to make it more user-friendly, so that it is something that is being used in the classroom to inform our instruction.
It's wonderful you did all this work, but you want to make sure the teachers use it.
Yeah.
And so what you're saying, they are using it, so
Mhm.
you're comfortable with
Yes.
that. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you, ladies. We'll move on to that next area of digital citizenship. So if Mr. Schmidl wants to come out. This was one of our first initiatives as the tech committee to look closer at pre-K really through 12th grade and how we're supporting our students with the technology we have here.
Good evening, how are you? Ms. Axel said we dove into creating our first digital citizenship curriculum that we have in the district, and we started rolling out like in June last year, and we, without having anything really in place to really start building, what we decided the place to start would be to survey our faculty members. And I know it's kind of a tall task asking faculty members last full week of school to do a quick survey, but we had 96 people that responded, and it was evenly balanced K-12, which was a real nice result, I thought, and gave us enough input from the staff members how to build our curriculum. And our survey was based on 7 themes that you could see up there. They came from commonsense.org, and what we did with the survey is we based upon we did everything, one theme from a theme 1 to 5. We asked the faculty members to grade which one of those themes from 1 to 5 was most prevalent or most important to their grade level, and then using that information, the 5-star rating, anything that averaged with your ever per grade level, we focused on that as an area that we should focus on with that group in the curriculum. We made benchmarks as our we made a series of benchmarks for each grade level based on the survey and our professional knowledge as library media specialists teaching technology all the time. And you also, like I said, use commonsense.org not only to build the survey questions, but also to guide us through the creation of the curriculum as well. The curriculum more or less looks like this. Hopefully the link works. And I'll show you one of them here, how it's laid out. For example, this is the cyberbullying one. We have our grade levels here with our benchmarks. We also have a column where it cross-references another portion of the curriculum. So like for example, cyberbullying in pre-K will also cross-reference with the theme of relationships and community. We can refer back to that and kind of tie them together. The other right column to the right is all blank. So what's nice about this curriculum is designed to be an evolving document. So as library media specialists push into the classrooms, we can identify areas of the curriculums like a math curriculum or a science curriculum or ELA curriculum as to where our digital citizenship curriculum fits into it. So we have the benchmarks there, but we could find an area like in social studies, for example, where maybe cyberbullying hits and add that into the column, and so it could continue to evolve on. So the way we hope to roll this out, kind of alluded to already, is that the library media specialists will work with the teachers in the respective buildings to identify the areas of current curriculum where it fits into that column like I just showed you. And the curriculum is also designed to be an evolving curriculum, like I said, with areas of implementation and resource of instruction will continue to grow with it. So it's kind of a new thing. We're working on for about 4 days in total between the all 4 library media specialists in the buildings, and as a result, we created a 60-page document on 7 different areas, and we worked hard with it, and it's exciting to see where it's going to grow from here. So, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Is there anything like this in the district around us right now, or are they going to be coming to you for your work you did?
Well, right now I know that's part of the thing is we're trying to identify it, because I know at the middle school, career and life, a lot of people down that way in the health classes also they do digital citizenship pieces in those areas, but eventually would probably reach out to those individuals and branch out and build on to what they're doing with what we're doing down in the library as well. So.
And what was the biggest surprise from the surveys?
The biggest surprise were what one grade level thought was important that you would think was important, and they didn't think was all that necessary, and focusing on it, just kind of the stats that came in with it. So, but we for a situation like that, we kind of used our trump card, thinking, well, this is important, and that should be covered that grade level, and hopefully we could, show our colleagues why it is. So.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. The other, I'll just mention too, with digital citizenship, the idea going into this project wasn't to add something else on the plates of the teachers, but to present an opportunity that the library media specialists can support the work that's being done, to present digital citizenship in a productive way. If someone goes to do a report or some sort of study in the library, there might be a piece that fits in well, and they could sort of add that to the lesson itself. And then also as the teachers develop and work with them, we're able to do that. So we didn't want to infringe on the teacher, but we wanted to work collaboratively, and that's why we'll be developing it over the next year. The last part, I think, is an important one that sometimes we don't talk about, and it's just one aspect of what we're doing here in Amherst that's important. It really starts with our new superintendent, Mr. Piniella. Instructional leadership, I'll say, is what this brief last part is. But on opening day, Superintendent Piniella spoke to our faculty and instructional staff. He made it really clear about, if you look at our logo, we have tradition, we have pride and achievement. He broke those down and talked about each one of those areas. He specifically spoke to the strength of our teachers, the instructional staff, our administrators, the people that work here, and the focus on teaching and learning, and doing the hard work to support one another, to look really closely, which is difficult, at our practices. I was lucky enough to be part of new teacher orientation. In that opportunity, Superintendent Piniella took time out of his schedule, not just to present, but also to be part of that group, along with some of our expert teachers that led that charge. But we talked about practices, and the one thing that I've understood, there's no perfect lesson in Amherst. We're looking to continually enhance, continually refine what we're doing, to understand, like you're asking, but is it working? How can you let me know that that approach is working? So we do know there's strength there. We also know there's other relationships that we have that can help teachers. We have strength within the leadership, instructional leadership of our teachers, but we have specialists such as Harvey Silver, Dr. Lynn Shanahan was mentioned with English, Eileen Ryan that we've worked with. We're doing this comprehensive strategic plan with the Warner Center. We have BOCES specialists that have worked, and you'll hear more about that work with the secondary. So there's a lot of people that we reach out to, but as I started this presentation, it really starts with our teachers, and it's supported by our superintendent and administrators. I'll just briefly talk about the Thoughtful Classroom for those people that are not aware. We have a framework for teacher effectiveness, and it's to help us all have common language and a common understanding. And this has been presented before. This summer we worked with Harvey Silver on the Principal's Effectiveness Framework, which is part of our accountability system, but it's also a great avenue to have real conversation with the professionals that we're working with in our district. So to show you briefly what this looks like, there's 3 components, these 4 cornerstones. That's something that we see almost daily, all the time. We have organization in a classroom, positive relationships, a culture of thinking and learning, engagement, enjoyment. Those are things we're working on. The other inners of this that looks like a plus sign, those are for teachers' episodes, and that was part of our new teacher orientation, but it's a training that we do, and we look closely at lessons. When administrators go into classrooms, they will focus on a specific lesson that might be working on preparing the students for new learning, if it's one of the first activities or instructional approaches that they do. And then again, when we get to the bottom one, applying the learning, that might be the showing and demonstrating what you're knowing. So those are a couple things that happen. There's a dimension 10 that's really the practice itself, and we evaluate that a different way. But I just wanted you to get a sense of this is common language, common understanding, inter-rater reliability, so that everyone's on the same page with what we're looking at and why we're looking at that. We were lucky enough to, same slide as before, but the gentleman that you see in all these pictures is Harvey Silver. So he's part of Silver and Strong. He's part of the person that worked with other professionals such as Charlotte Danielson's work and some of that seminal work for developing, positive instruction and best practices. The middle 4 blocks there, those are our building principals. They primarily will do their observation that will be a formal observation with all of our teachers. So those 4 pictures there, those people will take the lead on most of our formal evaluations. Below are a couple examples of central office. You would see Mr. D'Angelo, myself, Mr. Piniella, Mr. Belisle is another person, Mrs. O'Hearn. Those are other people at central office that will play a role in the classroom. So our evaluation will be those 4 cornerstones, we will visit all of the classrooms. Central office will as an independent evaluator. Some districts choose to use assistant principals or choose to hire someone from outside, but following our leadership from our superintendent, he felt and we feel, working with the teachers group, that it's important to be there, to be part of the collaboration and look closely at practices. So this framework is very important. We spent a full day going around from classroom to classroom just to do some inter-rater reliability this fall in September. We also spent 2 days with Harvey Silver to work on the principal framework. So there's a framework too for all our principals. They have the same cornerstones, but the middle plus sign for the principals would be goal related. So the idea of school improvement or enhancing what we're doing. So there is a focus that's very consistent, and I just want to be really transparent about it. So I thought this was a good opportunity to bring this up. And that concludes our presentation. So the only questions left might be about instructional leadership because a lot of them were asked. Is there anything in that
So in
portion?
regards to the integrated reliability,
Yes.
the central office as well as the building principals were going around into different classrooms? But
Yeah.
were you getting a snapshot of the same?
Yeah, that's a great term you use.
Because that's the difference with the integrated reliability, actually looking at the same
Yes.
classroom or the same lesson, if you're,
Yeah, I'll explain it as this. I understand what you're saying. So within each school, we had the assistant principals, the principals, and the same group of at least, I'll say 60% of central office part of that evaluation. The inter-rater reliability was within right now each building. So we'll have follow-up work at our cabinet meetings. We do have meetings with our principals throughout. That can be an area that we're able to take that one step further. We're continuing to work with Harvey Silver too, and we're going to be looking at, we haven't really talked about this openly, but looking at videotaping some lessons in an appropriate way, and then meeting with our building principals as a whole, and then having that discussion looking at the same exact video. So I recognize what you're saying, that we did not do that. That's very astute of you, so I love that. But I do think we're in a good path to do that, to move forward and have consistent evaluations, but not as an evaluation in a bad way, but to look closer and to help not just the teachers, but the administrators to be their very best and do their very, very best in the best interest of the students.
Can you talk a little bit more about the building goals that would be the cross part of the principal
Yes.
performance?
So, due to the Warner Center having this strategic plan and looking at the whole district and taking feedback from different groups and creating, I'll say, these big boulders, and that's what we'll all work on as a district and each building might work on. I would say if you looked at it from that frame, when we start to develop that middle cross for principals, there would be goals attached to that once we understand what our big goals are for a district from a strategic plan idea. Currently, the way we're looking at it, some of the principals I've talked with and some of their goals might be professional goals. So the idea that I want to get out in classrooms more often and be more visible, we've had some opportunities that people set up a schedule so that I'm able to make sure I make it into all of your classrooms because it's scheduled. And those are a couple goals that are in place currently, but the real plan is once the strategic plan is put in place, that will be a great vehicle to create some goals that make sense from a district perspective. So again, a really good question. For now, it might be more professional goals and building-based goals. One of them is implementing practices such as the secondary level looked at questioning. And on opening day, they were our instructional leaders that worked with teachers. Questioning was a strategy that was implemented. That was really part of their goal in can we do this to work with teachers to be seen as an instructional leader, to give them realistic strategies. And I had shared an email that a physics teacher said, I tried that and it was awesome. On the first day, I approached it a whole different way based on what they did at the high school for their initial day of opening day. So we're seeing some of those positive things happen and evolve. But I think, again, our superintendent's very focused, and I think that's moving down towards our administrators to teachers. Not to say people aren't focused, but it just has a heightened focus on why are we here and what are we doing, and are we seeing the results, and if we're not, what can we do to change that? So, thanks for your attention. I know this was a lot to share in one time.
Well, thank you for the presentation. Thank you to our teacher leaders for all your hard work. I also want to thank the board, because what you created was years ago an infrastructure that allows this work to be completed, and that infrastructure is going to be even more important as we move forward with our teacher leaders, because as you may have heard, the state has undergone a standards review process, and they're estimating that close to 50% or 60% of the standards may be changed as a result of the review engaged statewide, and that's due to begin this spring or winter and carry on through next school year, with new assessments in 18-19 being aligned to the revised standards. So we feel poised very nicely to tackle that, because we already have teacher leaders in place, we already have committees in place, Dr. Schoenfeld is here and he's in place. So anything that we are able to tackle is a result of the infrastructure you've created. So thank you for that and your continued support with that. I'd also like to recognize Marcy Pasquale later on. Unfortunately, we will be accepting her resignation. She's moving on to be an administrator in another district locally. So congratulations to you and good luck in your future ventures, and thank you for all your hard work here in Amherst as a teacher leader. Thanks.
Come back someday.
You never know. Last item in the superintendent's report is just an informational item about a new initiative that we've launched right now at the high school with affectionately known as the Superintendent Student Cabinet. So I've asked Ann Ward from the high school and Greg Pigeon to join me for this presentation so we can talk about this initiative and how we're getting it up and running in the next couple weeks.
Absolutely, so thank you. I guess I'll start. So we, under Mr. Pennell's leadership, have created a group that we are calling, as you say, the SSC, for Superintendent Student Cabinet. And my part in this is seeing it as an extension of my Fulbright fellowship from the spring. And as you remember, I presented in July about opportunities for engagement and student governance. And Mr. Pennell was very interested in this topic, and so met with us over the summer, and Mr. Pigeon came in to talk about leadership at the high school. And so we sat down and did our best to put together a group that would provide both a voice for students and also a resource for Mr. Pennell as he goes through this first year in his new position. And so we created what we did based on research from around the state. And so Mr. Pennell asked for his fellow superintendents to give feedback on the way this looked. And we picked, kind of somewhat unwittingly, I think, but also with an eye toward what we knew, a model that seems to be one of the most predominant ones from around the state. And we'll discuss that as we go and why we chose it. And we really look forward to cultivating some student leaders, both certainly as upperclassmen, but also looking lower into our grades and picking up kids who may have shown great promise at middle school, or just people who we've identified to groom, so to speak, for the next 4 years, with the idea being that we're helping them not only help the life of the school, but then certainly take other roles, as Mr. Vivallona spoke after my presentation about community leadership, where I would like to see some more of our students get more involved.
Our goal was to have a manageable group size as well. We wanted to have a nice cross-section and full representation of our student body. And we wanted to pull from some existing leadership groups. So we picked some of the big players in our building in terms of student leadership representation. That includes our student council and our student government, and they have elected officers to choose from, as well as an executive council that takes matters in school and initiatives forward, as well as our Pathfinders here, as you know, our upperclassmen formal leadership group, and they're the folks that come and present the Teacher of the Month, Student of the Month, and they're do a number of initiatives in the building, have a huge role in our adventure and our freshman transition program, so they're proven leaders. Our new group is our Trailblazers, which is an extension of the web leaders in the middle school, so we've impaneled our underclassmen now in a formal leadership program, and they were trained over the summer with a special leadership group, as well as have been given a task this fall in terms of being docents for our open house, and they'll be hosting some shadows from the private schools in our middle school, so they'll be hosting them in the fall as well. Our GSA is our Gay Straight Alliance, which has a voice within the building, representing students in that realm, as well as our building leadership team, who has 2 student representatives, our Captains Club, which represents the leadership of the athletic teams in the district, our CIA, which is Covered in Action, which is Cultural Unity Club, and our elected class officers at every grade level. So we had a number of wonderful leadership groups to pull from, and within that we took recommendations, and these students were recommended by both their advisors, as well as in part of their leadership within these groups. In many cases they're elected or appointed captains, so they have a recognized voice with students within their groups, so we thought they would be great representations to speak and meet with us as leaders, and specifically Mr. Piniella, in that they really have the mandate of their peers. So we thought they'd be a great group to pull from, so that's what we decided to do in terms of paneling a group of leadership leaders in our district, in the high school specifically. And I covered that, how they're selected is by their representative votes in those particular organizations, or sometimes it's an actual election when you're talking about our class officers or officers within a club, as well as kind of the vetting and recommendation from the advisors, the adults in those groups.
So that seems like a natural place to start. Again, as Greg mentioned, these students were already identified by their peers as leaders, and they're called upon in a leadership capacity, so it made sense to start with that group. The roles and responsibilities, this is a rough framework of what we plan to do. We haven't met with them yet, so our first meeting is forthcoming later this month. We plan to meet on the 3rd Thursday of each month at 7:45 in the high school. The focus of our conversations is on student life and the student experience at the high school. You know, what's going on in school, what's going on in the community, in the world, what's happening in their lives, you know, what are the hot topics in their world, you know, and then that idea of continuous improvement. How can we continually enhance the student life within the high school and their experience for them? We do have some level of confidentiality. You know, I fully expect that some of the topics discussed will be, you know, sensitive, especially when you're dealing with students as astute as ours are. I'm sure some topics that come up will be sensitive in nature. We will talk about the norms of our group during the first meeting and our expectations, but confidentiality will be one of them. But there will be times when the discussion will need to be expanded. So the second item there is, you know, when the discussion needs to be expanded, Mr. Pidgeon, Mrs. Ward, myself will, you know, work through those moments and expand the discussion, whether it be from a policy level or financial level to the Board of Ed or to the administration at the high school. You know, we anticipate that is something that we will be required to address as we move forward. And then we intend to come back in December and April to provide some updates. How's it going? Well, the first few meetings gone. Eventually, my goal would be able to expand this to the other buildings. You know, of course, you have to walk before you run, so we'll start with the high school level. Down the road, we look to expand to the other buildings to find opportunities for myself to engage with our students and student leadership in a similar fashion as that's appropriate for their level. So this is a preview of what's to come. Like I mentioned, the first meeting is scheduled for, I think, October 20th, at the end of this month with the group. Any questions from the board?
So as early as December, some of the students will come to our meeting and talk with us? That's what we wanted last year, right?
Mhm.
This is great.
Yeah.
I'm glad you got it started.
And will the 3 of you be in attendance at each meeting? Are you rotating, or what's the plan?
Well, I'll be at all of them. I'm certain Mrs. Ward will be at all of them, and Mr. Pigeon, I think we would welcome, but we understand if he's not able to make all of them.
Right,
I plan to be there, as many as I can.
I think I see myself, at least certainly for this year, as the administrator. And so, Mr. Pennella, I hope joins us on these Thursdays, but I hope to be able to structure the agenda before he gets there so that, kind of round up the troops, send the reminder emails, make sure that we have this so that the legwork, I hope, happens before he actually, hits the ground, so to speak.
One of our goals was for the students to take some ownership of the group as well.
Right.
And over time, kind of run it themselves so that Mr. Pennell and Ms. Ward, myself, when we come to a meeting, they've actually planned the agenda and are ready to, kind of engage in whatever those topics are.
Yeah, I think
That's the model.
putting a face with a name, engaging students in really good dialogue around topics that are relevant to their lives is really our focus right now and our mission. I think as it evolves, we'll have to, like anything, monitor and adjust how we go, but my excitement for this initiative is really centered around the quality of students we have in this community. I'm looking forward to some really rich conversation that the students bring to the table, and not just talking about why can't we have better lunches and things like that. I'm sure they will engage in very high level conversation that will be meaningful, and ultimately I see us in that slide that I had up there expanding some of the discussion eventually towards either the board level or the administrative level, depending upon what those topics end up looking like, whether it be policy or procedure. So it's an exciting opportunity.
Love the name. So what are we doing with the superintendent's task force and the Pathfinders?
The Pathfinders will continue to forward and be responsible for the Student of the Month and Teacher of the Month. So we've amended that somewhat. And they continue their role within the building as well in their leadership. One of their biggest leadership components is the planning of adventure. They would continue with that, as well as some of their docent duties related to open house and things of that nature. So they'll still have a very vibrant role in the building. And the Trailblazers are coming on strong as well. They are an eager group, and I've really enjoyed working with them over the summer. So I'm starting to fold them into some of those activities as well. They volunteered for open house, for example. They were eager to get involved in that. So I think we've got a new burgeoning leadership group. So we'll have a lot of great rigorous conversations with them as well, and give them added roles moving forward.
Transitioning is always an important
Yeah.
one. Transitioning 8th to 9th, transitioning, freshman to adulthood. But
Transitioning 5th to 6th.
transitioning 5th to 6th. So I think we've done a really nice job developing the leadership, and now we're trying to tap into that leadership and help us.
So Trailblazers are just ninth graders, is that?
Just ninth graders, yes. I plan on
They age
continued, well, I plan on having, their Trailblazers 2020, because they're by cohort. So I'll have Trailblazers 2020 and 2021 next year. So we'll have every grade level represented. And then the goal would be for many of them to apply and move on to Pathfinders, which is 11th to 12th grade. So we've got a nice smooth transition and no gaps in our leadership development now, and a great group, because we have plenty of things where we need student participation in. So it's been really exciting to get them in panel. And they're well trained coming to me from web, because they've had the web experience for 2 years, 7th and 8th grade. So they really have some strong leadership qualities already, so it's very seamless.
And are we still gonna be looking at doing some things at the middle school in particular regarding Student of the Month, Teachers of the Month? We're talking about pushing down and highlighting some of the other things that are going on in the buildings and some of those other leadership pieces, since we're trying to make some other connected points.
I think so. Initially, I wanted to have success in, one area and then grow it. So I think we're putting year 2 or 3 in our sights for middle school and elementary school expansion of this initiative. But it's important for myself to stay connected to the students, and I also think for our students and teachers to be recognized regularly too. And I know there's been a lot of discussion at this table in previous years around that. So this is our, getting our toe in the water, so to speak, and getting something off the ground, and then we want to learn from this and grow it.
I'm glad you're doing it this year and not waiting a year. This is good.
Thanks.
You're acting on it.
Yeah, thank you.
I still think it's important, though, that this all came out of a request from students to be a part of the board. And so, I hate to say it, the more we stay out of it, probably the better off things will be, because this is a student-centered, I don't even think it's an activity, but just a reminder, at least that's what I remember, so.
Thank
And
you.
we have yes and no, because we have mentioned before that we wanted something like this to transition for a number of years. But I think the new impetus and the push with it definitely came from the students coming up saying they wanted to help. So if they got more movement, maybe they need help too.
Well, also, I think Mrs. Ward's Fulbright experience was critical in maybe getting us over the hump and actually into action. But certainly it started with the young man who was here several times. Yeah, so it's nice to see the evolution of it. Okay. Thank you for co-presenting, and that's it for the superintendent's report.
Okay. On to new business then. I will need a motion for new business.
I will make a motion for new business. To do that in 2 weeks, meetings. I'll make a motion for new business items F1, A through E, F2, A through J, and F3, C, and D.
You have a second? Any discussion? Even my parents cannot abstain from
Yeah, we don't
Mrs.
wanna let
Pasquale. All right, all those in favor of new business items F1, A through E, F2, A through J, and F3, C, and D, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Mrs. Custodi, do we have any follow-up action items?
I do not.
And we do not have executive session tonight, so we will need,
I just ask one quick question. We had some water tests done a while back, and the state is making people do water tests. Do we have to redo them because they want them done when they want them done? Or are we now having to do water tests again?
Yes. Yeah, the state legislation passed earlier this month, or last month, September, required all tests to be taken from elementary schools by the end of September and secondary schools by the end of October. Last year, proactively, we had initiated water testing from all drinkable water sources within the school district, and those test results came back well below the required levels, significantly below. Unfortunately, the state has required all water sources to be tested, and they have to be tested at a approved facility that comes from the New York State Department of Health. So we were required to, unfortunately, take all the samples again and send them off to an approved facility. So the elementary ones have already been taken and have been shipped. The middle and high school are currently being taken, and then by the end of this month, they will be sent. So there's reporting requirements that are required as a result of this, both publicly on our website and through New York State, which we are on top of and ready to fulfill.
Are they gonna help us pay for this?
No, the estimated cost, I think when we costed it out, is somewhere around $10,000 to $11,000, but at this point, there hasn't been any associated aid associated with it, so it's one of those unplanned expenditures that you don't see when you're putting the budget together last April that hits us in the fall that we have to make sure we account for when we put our budget together.
Thank you.
We will need a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Thank you everyone for coming.
All I know.